morning. Welcome to our program on voting and what we can do to make people vote more, and especially to encourage women to run, because the feeling, I think, is that, especially after this week, we need more women everywhere running things. I think everybody can pretty much agree on that. Our panelists today are Kim Moffat, who is the Executive Director of We're the People. It's an LA-based organization. She'll tell you more about her organization very shortly. And Christina Reynolds, who's the Vice President of Communications for Emily's List. So we are calling her the Communications Director for the day. Kim is also doing a program at 10. It's in the program booklet at 4 this afternoon, but it's going to be in the amphitheater across our space at 10 a.m. She works on the lot at Warner Brothers and has information about the sacred space where the swing was made. So I would encourage you all there. I would encourage you all to come and to hear that. Also, there's some vendors just outside of the amphitheater. There's some really terrific fan art and fan tchotchkes, things that we all need. Christmas is coming, so go ahead and visit them and support them if you can, because they came. Someone came all the way from Arkansas to bring her stuff here, so we want to encourage that. And with that, I'm going to ask each of the ladies up here to introduce themselves, to talk about their organization, and then we'll ask some questions and give you guys a chance to ask some questions as well. So, Kim, would you like to start?
Sure. My microphone's on. All yells. My name is Kim Moffat. I'm the Executive Director of We're the People. We're a new nonprofit organization that is working for voter outreach and advocacy. So right now we're new, so we're doing the outreach part of it. We're working to get people excited about voting. We're getting people to start talking about politics, their beliefs, to have conversations with people that might not be super easy conversations, but they're important conversations. We want to encourage people and show people how to have cordial and polite conversations about things that you may deeply, deeply believe in, and the other person may also deeply believe in the exact opposite thing, but that conversation, those feelings that you have, they come from a real place, and we're trying to kind of just encourage open conversation. And then as we get going, we'll start working on advocacy, so helping right some wrongs like voter ID laws and postage for your mail-in ballot, and felon enfranchisement, all that kind of stuff. So.
I'm Christina Reynolds. I am with Emily's List. I have to say, I feel very connected to the West Wing because I started on campaigns in 1998. I went to work for the DNC and the Gore campaign largely in 1999 at a point when the West Wing came out, and so you go home and you visit your family, and everyone you knew who wasn't in politics and didn't live in DC would say, "Who are you in the West Wing?" And I was always very bitter because I was in research and they never had a researcher on the West Wing, which broke I love the show, but broke my heart. So I have always felt connected there. I worked in the White House for President Obama for a little while. Hillary was my 5th presidential campaign. Only won one. I thought I won one. I thought, great, I can stop. And then I had the chance to go work for Hillary, and I'm glad I did it, but it didn't turn out the way I wanted. I work for Emily's List now, and I don't know how many of you know of the organization. We are very proud of it. We love the West Wing because it is the only show that has ever mentioned and defined Emily's List. Who has seen that up? Yeah. So, right? The girl group with the funny name, right? As Toby puts it. It is, Emily's List was started 35 years ago, almost 35 years ago, by a woman named Ellen Malcolm, because women, at that point, no woman had been elected to the Senate of her own right. She had always been, her husband had died, or something like that, and she'd been appointed to the seat. And so there are 2 women that ran in the Democratic primaries or general elections, came very close, but couldn't raise money. People said, well, they're not going to elect a woman. And so Ellen said, okay, she pulled out her Rolodex, and she got her friends to pull out Rolodexes. I'm grateful to be in a room where people know what Rolodexes are, because I can tell you that for most of our staff, they look at us like we're crazy when we say that. and pulled out their Rolodexes, and they literally handwrote letters to their friends and said, please give money to these, you know, in that case it was Barbara McCausland, it grew, to these women who are running, and they did it on their own, and they built a network. It's not working. Oh, it is working. Oh, there we go. And so they built a network, and that network has grown. We now have, the first woman we elected was Barbara McCausland, former senator from Maryland, right? We love Barb. Big Sale Barb is what she called herself for a while, because that's how she used to raise money, and then Emily's List came in. Emily stands for Early Money is Like Yeast, because it makes the dough rise. So we started as a fundraising organization. We are now 5 million members strong. We have elected almost 1,000 women from state and local races all the way up, well, not quite all the way up, but all the way up to Senate and governor. This including, you know, nearly every woman who currently serves in Congress, a large number of the governors, although we haven't had enough female governors. This cycle, we've sort of blown everything out. We have trained 5,000 women. In our entire history up until this cycle, we had trained 9,000 women, so you can see the explosion of what's happened this year. We also have had, you know, in the 2016 cycle, and typically, I know we're going to talk about how more women should run. Typically, women have to be asked to run. Our president, Stephanie Shryock, literally had to sit at a table with Elizabeth Warren, very qualified woman, and say, no, you can do this. You should be a senator. You can run, and had to convince her to run. So typically, we've had to recruit women. We've had to sort of beg them to run, because it's hard. And women face a lot of challenges that men don't when they run. This cycle was a little different, and what happened was, in the 2016 cycle, 920 women reached out to us saying, hi, I think I'd like to run for office at some point, can you help me? That was a record, they called it the Hillary bump.
Just a quick question, was it influenced by the Women's March? Because I know that during the
It
Women's
was
March.
a lot of things. So what happened was, in the first month after the election, so even before the Women's March, just people woke up. I will tell you, I worked for Hillary, so I was crawling under my covers. The women at Emily's List were, you know, trying to figure out what's next. And in that first month, even before the march, 1,000 women reached out, which is incredible, you know, broke the entire 2-year period's record, right? And then after that, we had things like the Women's March. Emily's List was a sponsor of the Women's March. We worked with them. We did a training the day after, partnering with them, where 500 women showed up, and we had a wait list equally as long. We just couldn't fit them in the room. And that has just continued to grow to the point where we've gone from a record of 920 to, as of this morning, 42,050. So that growth, I mean, I'm glad to see, because we say those numbers so much that they become a little like, oh yeah, 42,000. When you stop and think about it, that kind of growth is nuts. And we're seeing it in races around the country where we have record numbers of women running in everything. You know, we have record numbers of women winning their primaries, which is pretty awesome. We like to think we help, but you know, that's pretty great. And it's just something that we've never seen before. And I think it's that women sort of took a look at the last election, and instead of crawling under their covers like I did, they said, all right, I'm gonna go to work, right? I'm gonna fix it. It is so inspiring, and our candidates are different than we've ever seen before. They're first-time candidates. They have a wide variety of experience. They're not the typical, first you run for city council, then you run for this, then you run for that. They are coming out of the woodwork, and they're doing the work, and so they're raising money like we've never seen before, small dollar donations. You hear a lot, and we love him, and I hope he wins, about Beto O'Rourke, but I can tell you that's happening in House races around the country, even without that kind of attention. And it's amazing. I mean, you know, one of my favorite examples, Sharice Davids, is a Native American woman. We have never elected a Native American woman to the House as a country, ever. We've elected Native American men, not enough, but we've never elected a Native American woman. Sharice Davids is running in Kansas 3. Kansas, not exactly a bastion of liberal values, right? She is running in Kansas. She's a lesbian. Also not something you might think of in the Midwest necessarily, but goodness knows that is changing. She's Native American. She's an MMA fighter. She's also a lawyer. She's awesome. Go look her up, watch her video. She's awesome. And I've met her, and she's about this tall. I'm like, how do you throw people around? She's a badass. Charisse has raised $700,000 in the first, I think, like month and a half after her primary. Small dollar. All like just people who, she got out, she did the work, people saw her, they liked her, she's knocking doors, and she turned that seat in Kansas into a toss-up by the virtue of the strength of her campaign. That's what we're seeing around the country, and it's really inspiring, and it's happening because of women. So
that is exactly what we want to hear. That's fabulous. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Kim, I know we're going to show your film tomorrow. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So about 5 years ago, does anybody here know who Wendy Davis is? I'm sure are very aware. If you don't, Wendy was a state senator in Texas who had a 13-hour filibuster. She spoke for 11 and then for 2 hours. There was chaos. It was amazing, and I heard about it through Twitter because nobody was showing it online. Even MSNBC didn't have, nobody had it. But over 100,000 people were tuning into YouTube to watch a state senator in Texas filibuster. It was amazing. It was a moment. And the next day I woke up and was like, I gotta do something. This woman's incredible. She announced her run for governor in October, and something compelled me to say, I have to be a part of this. It's magic, whatever it is. And so I started doing a documentary about her. I just wanted to go out and kind of be a part of it all. She lost her race, and I thought maybe the movie was kind of over. And then once Hillary started running, I thought maybe in this movie there's a loss and then probably a win. Spoiler alert. So I made a documentary about these two races and looking at politics and getting involved and voting through the lens of Wendy's race in Texas and the larger lens of our 2016 presidential election, and mostly just kind of my journey through understanding what made me want to get involved, and through that understanding, hoping that I can encourage others to get involved. So I would encourage you guys to come check it out. There are Lego minifigures in it, and dinosaurs, if that, and me. But really, come for the Lego. It's cool.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Had you watched The West Wing?
Absolutely, yes.
Did that inspire you to,
Yes,
get
definitely.
involved?
I watched The West Wing when it was on television, and then throughout the process of making the movie, it was a 5-year journey, and a lot of times I thought, one, I'm not going to finish this movie, and two, I don't want to finish this movie, especially after 2 really hard losses. When Wendy lost, it felt, and our organization is nonpartisan, so this isn't me speaking on behalf of the organization, but just for me personally, when Wendy lost, it felt the same as when Hillary lost, and it was devastating. But I really turned on The West Wing often just to kind of remember the optimism that you can sometimes find in politics, and that optimism is found in The West Wing, and you start to feel a little bit of hope and a little bit of like, yeah, I can power through this, and that's what I found in The West Wing.
That's terrific.
I'll tell you, there was something that, as a researcher in the DNC working on policy issues in 1999 and 2000, the thing that we loved the best about the West Wing, I mean, it was nice, it's like, oh, Democrats winning, yay. And during, after the Supreme Court handed the election over and things didn't go our way, it was nice to watch, like, oh, look, that was good. But the best thing for us was, I remember watching an episode where they talk about the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, and I was like, oh my God, like millions of Americans are sitting and watching an explanation of a complicated policy issue that we've been trying to explain why it's important, and believe it or not, it's more compelling coming from Rob Lowe or, Martin Sheen than Al Gore. And, and they kept doing, there were different, like the census, and there were a variety of things that were like, now do this one, fingers crossed, right? But it was such a lovely thing, and I had the pleasure of, I worked at a PR firm for a while, and my office was across from Dee Dee Myers, who was, I think a consultant and writer on the show, and a former White House press secretary. And Dee Dee always talked about that was part of, one of the goals was helping demystify some of the policy, because it is important, and you can't even get the news to cover policy, right? Like, we saw this during the Hillary Trump election. It was like, well, there's Trump at a rally, or there's Hillary giving a policy speech, and I can tell you which one got covered, right? And so it was, for us, it was just a lovely thing where it was like, thank you for helping make this palatable and interesting and entertaining that we liked. I also will tell you, I didn't understand the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty until I watched it. It's not one of my issues, so.
Right. And the census, that's another thing they kept trying to explain. I'll just give a little bit of background of why I'm interested, or basically I've enjoyed watching The West Wing, and then my husband at the time was I'm from Boston, and he's a native Bostonian, and in Boston, particularly in Dorchester, where he's from and where Lawrence O'Donnell happens to be from. Politics is like another sport. You have teams, and it's a blood and guts, all sorts of things, competition. And I was lucky enough. I worked on. I was the phone bank captain for Elizabeth Warren for Dorchester, and I was in the room. I was really lucky to be in the room when she made her first house party discussions about whether she should run. And then I worked also on Ayanna Pressley's first campaign. She's a rising star, and now she is about to become my congresswoman. So I couldn't be more thrilled, and I know Emily's List recognized her and supported her. So I'm so happy to be on the stage with you guys, because you're actually doing the work that is really, really important. I'm going to see if anybody else has any questions, because this is a chance to find out. Would you be interested in running? Would you be interested in supporting a candidate? Do you have any questions about the women here, or their backgrounds, or what would make a good woman candidate?
Well, my main question, I work in the government, so naturally we're restricted by the Hatch Act. So there's a lot of things we can't do. But given that, do people like it? What kind of people in my position do? That meaning is there's a lot of things we can't run for office. We can't run for office. Right. We can't host.
You can't host fundraisers, right?
Yeah, we can't host fundraisers.
Yeah, I know you can donate, because I'm in my day job. I'm an employee of the city of Boston, so I'm restricted in what I'm able to do to a degree as well. You can donate, you just can't fundraise. And in your own time, you can volunteer. You can phone bank, you can stuff envelopes, you can do whatever needs. Believe me, it's person power in the office that really matters. Campaigns, just like West Wing Weekend, runs on volunteer energy. So just showing up and helping and standing out and holding a sign, or beeping as you drive by for a candidate that you believe in. That's a good thing too.
Yeah, I will say, having had stuff thrown at me, the beeping and the thumbs up are much better. I think that's right. I think I will say we all, certainly at Emily's List, we all feel snake bit by, everyone thought going in that Hillary was going to win. She didn't. And so our boss, Stephanie Shriak, who's our president, who's fantastic, and she's like a coach. She's a political operative, and she's raised over like $250 million in her job, and she's phenomenal. She should run for office one day. It's just my opinion. But Stephanie likes to remind us, like, hey guys, at some point we're gonna have to start to believe that we're winning, right? Because we have, that Democrats took that energy from you mentioned the Women's March, right? From the Women's March, from all of the marches, from, the March for Our Lives and all of that, and they took that and they've taken it to the polls. And so we've seen in Virginia, we flipped 15 seats in the legislature, and 11 of those were women. That was a little bit of an untold story, and we were very proud of that, including the first 2 Latinas in the Virginia legislature, first Asian American woman, the first transgender woman, a woman named Jennifer Carroll Foy, who, if you don't know her name, you should, because that woman will be president one day. There's phenomenal people out there, and we keep having these victories, and we keep like still being like, I don't know, maybe, that night I can tell you we were like, maybe we'll win 5 and it'll be great, and then 11 came in, would have been 12 literally except for a coin flip, and so the vote was legitimately tied. So that's the first thing I will say is vote. Make sure that you are registered. We saw it in New York. We've seen it all over the place, and especially in places where they're worried about keeping power. People get dropped off the rolls if you were an inactive voter, and in some states, inactive is defined as not voting in one election. So if in the last election you didn't vote, they may drop you off the rolls. And if you're in a state, and most of them do not have same-day registration, but if you're in a state that does not have same-day registration, you get there to vote and you discover you're not on the rolls. That's a big problem. So check now. Make sure that you are registered. No, I would argue, here's the thing, if you're in a state that has early vote, go early vote. It will save you not every single one of those annoying calls about have you gone out to vote, but it'll save you some of them. And you allow yourself, if you like a candidate, you go and vote for them early. You allow them to focus their attention on other people. So go vote, because you also never know what's going to happen on election day. Make sure your friends are doing the same, and these are things that anyone can do. Know your own rules, because I think some cities and some jobs, and even within the federal government, have different rules, right? But you can donate, and $5 helps. I got so angry yesterday. I gave $25 to Joe Donnelly to thank him for his for saying he would vote against Kavanaugh. And then I thought, you work for an organization that supports women, go give some money to women. And so I did a list of like 20 women that I gave just a little bit of money for, just because it matters. It all matters. And so do that. Make sure, if you can. I know, like my mom she has a chronic illness. She can't go knock doors, but she's like, I can bake brownies. Would they like brownies? And having worked in campaigns, yes, they would like brownies.
And
right?
pizza. You eat a lot of pizza.
And, and snacks of any sort, right? And I worked in South Dakota. We had a lot of casserole and hot dish, right? Whatever you can do, any of that is helpful, but keep up that momentum. I think we all run a little scared. I know when a lot of us saw the Women's March, it was like, please keep doing it. This day can't be it. And so just anything you can do matters. And I will say the biggest thing is remind your friends. You're here because you're engaged in this discussion. Not everyone is, and there is definitely a feeling out there of my vote doesn't matter. It does. Again, I just talked about Shelley Simons. Literally, the vote was tied. Dead even. They recounted it twice, still dead even. And the rule in Virginia was that you pulled a name out of a hat, and that is how she lost her race. One vote would have made a difference there.
And that vote would have led for a power sharing agreement in one of our houses in the legislature, because going into it, there was a Republican supermajority.
Yep.
So they went from a supermajority to one vote, and if that one vote, that flip had gone the other way, then Republicans would no longer be in sole control of that chamber. It was such a critical seat. It was devastating.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about this for Hillary, literally 80,000 votes in certain states would have flipped the election, right? But this is a case, I mean, you're exactly right. It literally, they would have been tied. It would have meant shared control of the committees and of all sorts of things. And so part of it is convincing your friends. Shelley Simons is her name. Go look her up. Use her as an example if you need to. That, I think, is one of the biggest things we can do. And get them engaged now to make sure that they're registered. Some states are really bad about this.
Yeah, I agree that getting your friends registered to vote. You are politically involved. You probably have a lot of friends that are. I guarantee, just based on turnout, you have 3 friends that aren't. You have 3 friends that do not understand how important their vote is. talk to those 3 friends. Have conversations that might be really frustrating at first because it's kind of like talking to a wall. I'm thinking of one friend specifically. Sometimes it's really hard and you're gonna, get a little frustrated. Continue to have the conversation nicely, obviously, they're still your friends, but have the conversation, have it as often as you need to. Have it in car rides where they can't escape and get them registered and then have a plan. Hey, we're going to go vote today and then we're going to go out and have some dinner. We're going to go vote this morning on our way into work. Help them create their election plan because registering to vote, key. Actually going out and voting, the registering doesn't matter if you're not going to actually do it. And make sure you're registered to vote. People are dropping off rolls without knowing. Sometimes it's because you missed an election. Sometimes it's because there are errors that drop people off rolls. So if you voted in every single election, fantastic. You have to make sure you're registered still because you don't know. It could have, we're seeing it all over in LA right now. A ton of people that have registered or that voted in every single election have checked and found out that they're off the rolls. So definitely make sure.
I'm not sure what the actual rules are, but I know in Massachusetts, because I've also worked as a poll checker, you can cast a provisional ballot, which means you can vote, but then it sort of depends on where things stand at the end of the whole process, whether that vote gets counted. And another close race that has come up recently in Massachusetts 3rd, it came down to 155 votes. They had to have a recount, and the candidate who came out on top is a woman. So it was Nikki Tsongas's chair, and it looks like it will likely stay in a woman's chair. So we're pretty happy about that.
And the first Portuguese American woman ever elected to Congress. I know that because I work with a couple Portuguese American women who are very happy about it.
That's great. Great. Yep.
Does Emily's List as an organization support all women candidates of any party?
No, we are. We were created to help Democratic pro-choice women, and even within that, you see this cycle. We like to say it's a really good problem to have. Like, no one complains if too many men are running for office, right? And this cycle, people are like, what are you going to do if there's a primary with 2 women? And we say celebrate, right? Like, that's a great thing. But in some, we have to do the tricky, we don't endorse every pro-choice Democratic woman. A part of our endorsement mattering to all of our members and showing them that, yes, this is a candidate that we've sort of run through the ringer is that we get under the hood. We want to know that they have a path to victory. So that means, do they have not are they rich, not do they start with a fundraising network, but do they have a plan to do the work? Like, we'll train them. But you have to raise money to run for Congress, unfortunately. It's just a fact of politics, and it's a sad fact of politics. We hope to level the playing field. But, do you have a plan? Do you live in a district that we think is winnable? And I will tell you that this cycle, we're still endorsing because the map is expanding. Races that we would normally say, like, no, there's a 20-point registration advantage, and in midterms, Democrats don't come out, so it's even harder. We're looking at it and going, she's running a really good campaign, and we think there's going to be a wave, so we're going to expand it out. But we are solely Democrat. Yeah.
Yep. So I live in Northern Virginia. Our Senate race is not close. My district is not close. But there are so many races across the country. So if I want to donate money, is there anywhere where I can donate where they can help decide where to direct it? Because you can't.
Liz Watson, 9th District of Indiana.
And Emily's List candidate. We love Liz. So I think you have to direct it to a candidate. Now, there are different funds. So I will say, if you go to the Emily's List webpage, we have a handy, I know because I did it yesterday with all my women, we have a handy page where you can just do like $5 here, $10 here, and then we bundle it up and send it to the different candidates. There are also some funds, if you look on Act Blue, or you just kind of search around, like, someone created a fund for all the Senate candidates who are in tough races but are doing the right, what I view as the right thing on Kavanaugh. There's some different, there are some organizations that are doing, here's all the veterans that, or woman veterans or things like that are running. Unfortunately, what you can do in that case is give to groups. It won't go directly to the candidate, but in some case, it's a group that's going to do GOTV in X number of districts or things like that. But to give to candidates because of the FEC, you have to actually direct it.
There's a question all the way in the back.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned Act Blue. I'd just like to caution folks to be careful if you're using Act Blue. They have been known to accept your one-time donation as a recurring monthly donation. So be careful with that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to double check and make
Yeah.
sure things aren't checked off as an automatic
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
as any time you give your credit card on the internet, I'm a librarian. I caution people on internet safety all the time.
Yeah.
Always read the whole page.
It's a little more work, but if you take the time to find out how to contribute directly to your favorite candidate's campaign and write them a check and mail it to them, that works.
There's nothing wrong with old school. Seriously. Yep.
So one, I just have like a little pro tip. There's an app called ResistBot. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. ResistBot. It helps you write to your congresspeople. But one of the things that it started doing is it'll check to see if you're registered, and then it will offer to check once a month and let you know.
Awesome.
Wow, that's
That's really cool.
Yeah, and so it'll just like send you like a little message, either a text or something like that, and just being like, okay, you're still registered.
I'm just saying this for the official record. The app that she mentioned is called ResistBot. It will check your registration once a month, and I can't think of anything better. It's amazing what
That's
people
awesome.
can do.
That's really cool.
Very cool.
And then I do have a question. So you were talking about with Emily's list how a lot of times you have to go and you have to seek out a candidate, and you have to ask them and tell them that they can do it. So what does that look like? What kind of person are you looking for, and how do you find them?
It's a good question, and I will say it's happened a lot. Like this cycle, they're coming to us, which is a wonderful thing. What we look for is a person who, one, will do the work. Running is really, really hard. As someone who's worked on the campaign staff, I'm kind of glad to know it's hard, because it's hard for the staff. It should be hard for the candidate. But it's someone who will do the work. Someone who is, I think, knows the district and has a reason for running. That's not usually a problem, because if you ask, and there have been some studies, I think the Barbara Lee Institute has done this, but where if you ask men why they're running for office, there are a variety of answers. Sometimes it's to get to the next step. Sometimes, if you ask women, a plurality of them say, to fix a problem in my community. And so part of it is, do you have a reason for running? We don't tend to support people who are running just because they view it as something that would be cool, or I would like to be elected. It's because they and if you look at like Elizabeth Warren had a reason for run, she's been a consumer advocate for a long time. She's the reason the CFPB exists. So a piece of it is that. A piece of it is, does it feel like you are you work within the district, and that's also changing, right? I think it used to be, there's a knock that Emily's List only supports conservative candidates. That's not the truth. We are in some conservative districts, and in those places, again, as I mentioned, you have to be pro-choice Democratic woman to get endorsed by Emily's List. So we're not looking at, we're not Republican, we're not anti-choice, like that. You have to be pro-choice. But beyond that, we don't have policy criteria. We want to know that you're going to do the work and that you're going to be able to tell a story that engages voters. And I will tell you, it's the most compelling thing about this cycle, and a lot of it, I think, comes from first-time candidates. These women are running because of their story. So when they talk about, I would say most of our women, if there's one issue that really resonates, it's healthcare. And they're not talking about, well, we need to repeal, this is what we need to do with the, Obamacare fixes and blah, blah, blah. They're talking about Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan, who lost her mother because she didn't have health care, and by the time she went to the hospital, her cancer was untreatable, by the time they discovered it. Cindy Axney in Iowa, who, this is one of my favorite stories because it's a little less tragic than some of them. Cindy didn't have money for the maternity rider on her health insurance. She and her husband just couldn't afford it. They were starting a business. They just thought, we can't do it. Then Cindy had a baby.
And let me just say, how absurd is that to have a rider for maternity coverage?
Cindy had a baby, and they literally sold a bunch of their possessions on eBay to pay for the hospital bill. That these stories, you know, people who have, Kim Schreier is a doctor, but she's also diabetic. She has a pre-existing condition. She understands the fear of what if they take away, you know, the ban on pre-existing conditions, right? These women are talking about their lives. They're not talking about policy. And like, I'm a policy wonk. I worked for Hillary, and God knows that woman's a policy wonk. But I want to hear, like, what's compelling to voters is when you talk about something you actually understand. And that's a part of what we look for. But again, this cycle, we don't know, they're coming to us. And it's wonderful.
Yep.
I have a question for Kim. You talked about getting voters and people excited about voting. My kids have been out of school for a few years. Are they doing anything at the high school level or the junior high school level? So that by the time these kids are 18, they know this is, you know, like just like you needed to register for selective service or whatever it's called so that you can submit a FAFSA for college. You know, do they know that at 18, this is what's expected of us?
Not so much, not really. I've been out of high school for a little while, but I took a civics class that I was vaguely interested in, and that's still kind of the case for a lot of these high schools. We have an idea. We want to start thinking about helping high schools and even junior highs start working out their ASB programs. So all their student elections, we kind of have an idea that we think it would be cool to help them have their elections closer emulate our national and statewide elections. That way they know how to register to vote. You could have students potentially registering for their ASB elections so that they understand you need to register to vote.
I would hope that these phenomenal kids from Parkland are sort of stirring things up, but you know, a lot of that age are still so self-involved, they don't even see that. So, you know.
Yeah, it's so hard because these kids are amazing. They're truly amazing. And you want to hope that they can reach out to a lot of people that are their age and say, look, we didn't know what we were doing. We were thrust into something that was awful. And from this awful, tragic moment, they grew and became this strong group that hopefully can kind of light a little bit of a fire in a lot of other students and help them see that it just takes caring about your future to, at least register, get your friends registered. But yeah.
I can just offer this. In my library, we have voting for the kids. They vote on their favorite character or the name of a fish or whatever. We have a little ballot box, so they get the idea. Yeah, they voted for Captain Underpants. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be for office per se, but just get people used to the idea that they can participate and have something to do about that. And I just want to double check the time because my phone has died. Okay, good. We've got about 5 minutes and we'll have to wrap it up, but
Can we just bounce off of what she said?
Sure.
So before we moved, we were at a magnet school that was always under siege. And so our kids got really used to going to city council meetings, and so they were present for those and watching the process. And so I would just encourage mothers to take their children to school board meetings, to city council meetings, so they can see on a micro level, because sometimes the macro level is too daunting, especially at that age, but then they can see how the micro affects the macro. So,
And you've had your hand up a while.
Ignore that level of engagement as a country, and that's important. Like, your school board is important. That impacts your day-to-day life. You have kids a lot more than, who has that seat in the House of Representatives in D.C.
Absolutely.
So I'm a 10th grade teacher, so I work with, we have a Panelists club, and I have a lot of really engaged young women, but they're 15, so they can't register to vote, and they don't have money because they're 15. So how could a minor that is a teenager become involved in the process if they really want to be?
I would imagine they can volunteer. If that's just going to the whatever office is, for whatever is running, they would be welcome, I'm sure. And
Yeah, I think volunteering. I mean, to the point about school board, and I will say we don't endorse the school boards. We have tripled the size of our state and local team, and endorsed. We're at 520, I think, right now. Women running for state legislature around the country, because the legislature, what they're doing matters so much. They make laws that directly impact people's lives, and no one really pays attention. And so there are races everywhere. I would say that volunteering, if they're comfortable and their parents are comfortable with it, you can stuff envelopes at they don't have to. I think there's sometimes a hesitation of, look, making phone calls is not always easy. Sometimes people yell at you. They don't like to be called, right? And maybe there's the hesitation of not having kids do that. They can, there are now direct text programs that people can get involved in. They should do it through campaigns, so they know they're doing something right. You can stuff envelopes. You can, making walk packets, just putting the stickers on the here's where you go and vote for each, district. That takes hands and bodies, and 15-year-olds have them, right? I think, yay. I think they also, they should make sure their parents are read, right? Like, they can talk to the adults in their lives, because it is, part of what's so compelling about those Parkland kids is it's been a long time since I've been in high school, and to hear them say, like, I'm going to, pardon my French, but get your shit together, America, is pretty yeah, what are we doing here? These kids are right? And so I think having them do the research, understand their community, and then actually reach out to the adults in their lives can be a pretty powerful thing.
they can always
They
write a
too
letter.
can bake brownies too. Brownies matter.
Go ahead. Two more questions, but go ahead.
Do you vet your candidates?
Yes.
Yeah, because I was about to say, that when you find out all this stuff that's coming up, that you find out about, tax and all that kind of stuff, that you do vet your...
We vet them. Here's what I will say. Yes, we do. A big piece of it is to make sure that they're not telling us they're pro-choice for an endorsement, but they're actually not, right? But we vet them, but also, we live in a world where Donald Trump is president. We live in a world where, I love the guy I worked for, and Barack Obama admitted to cocaine use in a book that he wrote, right? Well before he ran for office. So we're no longer at a place where you can't do that, you can't say that. That is I believe there are no silver bullets in campaigns. I believe that fundamentally, particularly if you own up to things and say, I made this mistake, but this is what I learned, that's one good example of that is Stacey Abrams. If you don't know of Stacey Abrams, right, learn of her. She is amazing. She's running for governor in Georgia. Would be the first black woman ever elected governor in this country. She has a large amount of debt, and she got hit by it from the Republicans, and her response was, yeah, I went to expensive college. I'm proud of my Ivy League degree, but it was expensive, right? And yes, I have helped my family, because her family, she has a large family. She is very open about the fact that she has a brother who went to prison and struggles with drug addiction. Those are things that, I've been in politics a long time, and I can tell you in a past vet might have been like, I don't know. And now it's like, well, how does she talk about it? What does it matter? There's a candidate in West Virginia who's a friend of mine named Tally Sargent, and Tally talks about having opioid abuse in her family. Tammy Baldwin has, for years, she is a senator from Wisconsin running for re-election. Tammy has talked for years and done a lot about opioid abuse, and it wasn't until this cycle that she talked about the why, which was that her mother was an addict. And little Tammy used to walk herself home from school and not be able to get in because her mom would have locked her out. And, if a friend of the family tells this story in one of her ads, but it's something where she's never talked about that. She does now, because we're in a different space. So yes, we vet them, and a piece of that is so we can say, what about this? What do you say to this? And not necessarily that it's disqualifying.
And another thing is that everything that is being talked about, being in college debt, having family members with opioid struggles, this is something every single family in America deals with. And to imagine that it's not is unrealistic. And I think it actually makes them more human, or at least we recognize their humanity a little better. One last question. Yep.
Yeah, before I mention, talking about the people that your vote counts, and I've been having a conversation with some people, and ADHD boy hasn't done the research, so but you three would know if my response is accurate. When people talk about, what is that? Look at Bush and Gore in 2000, and Kerry and Bush in 2004, and look at 2016, Hillary won by 3.5 million votes, and still we have Trump, etc. So what is the Republicans do gerrymandering, and they bump people off the road, they stop people from voting, etc. So what's the point? And my response has been, how the hell did Barack Obama become president?
That's right.
Because I don't believe that the Republicans sat back in 2008 and said, Democrat, liberal, black guy, we'll sit this one out.
Yeah, that's right.
Because he won by 8 million votes.
And I would add, we talked about Virginia, we talked about that one vote and what a difference it could have made, but here's the reality. Even with not having gotten that shared control, Virginia expanded Medicaid this year because of all of those people that got elected, some by small margins, right? They expanded Medicaid, and that makes the difference that makes to those families is incredible. Your vote matters. Doug Jones is a good example, right? Doug Jones is in the Senate now and is out there doing some really great things because people in Alabama didn't say, I live in Alabama, there's no hope here, right? I think it matters. I worked on a race in South Dakota that was just decided by 524 votes. I believe Florida was, and we won, right? And I will tell you that most of us on that race had come off the Gore campaign where we'd lost Florida by 500 and, some odd votes. And when we saw the numbers coming in and they were so close and we didn't get a win until 7:45 the next morning, we all thought, if this happens again, we're going to go play in traffic, right? We can't do this. But it didn't. And what I can tell you is, it's never... There were a lot of people. I have a friend who I worked with on the Clinton campaign. It was her first job. She was so dynamic. She was so angry afterwards, and she thought we were on the right side. We knew all the bad things this guy would do, and what happened. So she started looking up her friends' voter registrations and whether they voted, and calling them on it. And they would all be like, "Well, I was in New York, it didn't matter." And she said there were races that, and she's ended friendships. I'm not saying end friendships. I'm not necessarily saying you need to go and look up your friends' votes. But what I am saying is, it matters. 80,000 people made the decision that I don't need to come out today in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. And that has made a world of difference for a lot of people, right? So, one person decided they weren't going to come out for Shelley Simons, or the Republican, I get, but he ended up winning. And that made all the difference. So I think, pointing to any of those, but there are close ones where we've won, and that's,
But what I was thinking was that it's that Obama won by so many votes.
Yeah.
Of course the Republicans did the same thing. It didn't matter.
Yes. Yes.
So your vote matters. That's the takeaway from all of this. Yes. Thank you guys all so much for coming and being such great participants in this, and thank you both. You've been, that's really great.